So, welcome back from break. You will notice, Terry probably already noticed, that there's no more big cart in the middle. Over break, finally the magical time. I think it was like week 6 or so that it took, but we finally got a new bulb for the projector, which is good. Things are nice. Things are looking up. If you go to Canvas and you click on the announcement for Tuesday and Wednesday classes, because it's weird this week, Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday, Friday. No school on Monday. We're going to start with today in class. We're going to welcome everybody back from break with a new seating arrangement. Wow. All right, so how this is going to work. Actually, let me, before you guys get up and walk around, let me take attendance here. Do that first. Right. That was pretty good. All right, we are only missing one person. Which is good. All right, so right now we are missing one person, and if you look at all just the normal seats, she talked. We have 2, 3, 4 open seats. We're missing one person. So if we go from this row up, there should be 3 empty seats, which means nobody needs to get far enough away. Nobody needs to sit here. All right. So the rules are, I'm going to let you guys pick your own seats, but the rules are it's these 4 and forward. Nobody sits back there. All right. I want you to think about sitting next to somebody that you enjoy. However, you also need to be able to be productive. And if you are not productive, if you are talking and always off task, then I will move you and override your choice. Again, probably not today. Probably won't find out for another few days. But if it doesn't work, I will override it. But as long as you guys make good decisions, I will let you guys pick your seats for the last 8 weeks or so, the last 2 months of school for 4th quarter. All right? So, does anybody have any questions? That's what we have left. All right. Up. Move. Go find. If you like your spot, you can stay where you're at.
Brandon, taking your seat. David, Brandon. Mom, you did this.
Yeah, I'm sorry.
Hey, but I'm so tired.
Oh, man.
Abram. Oh, you guys gotta sit.
All right. They can all have a happy family.
And every single one put that white.
There's 2 seats.
All right, so I am going to, based on where you're sitting now, I am going to redo the seats.
The seats.
That I have, I have it set up like this. Before it looked like this. So then as I look at it up here, it's where everything is sitting. So I am just going to vote. So I have the great graph. All of that there. There. That would have. All right. Oh. All right. So now we are done. We are done with the seats. The next thing I want to talk about before we get into evolution notes, I just want to talk a little bit about grades. Grades, if you guys check your Skyward right now, it should be 100% up to date. There were a few people that turned stuff in like last period or so, and I got it graded already, and it should be in Skyward. The grade should be 100% up to date. The only thing that might not be up to date is if you have done a late Khan Academy, but I also don't have any Khan Academy emails. So you haven't told me that you did it, that's why it's not changed. Like I said, I'm not going to just ignore you. If you did a Khan Academy late, I will do my absolute best at fixing all those grades, but because it takes so long, I am not going to do that until closer to the end of the school year, like May. If you don't want that 0 in the grade book, if you want that changed earlier, send me an email, and when I know who exactly to look for, it's actually pretty easy. But when I am just looking at all 131 people and all 5 things, when I'm looking at like 600 Khan Academies, it's very difficult to pick out 1 or 2 that have done it versus last time. So I just don't do it. I will update it, but it will probably stay at 0 until about the last week of school. Unless you email me. Email me and I know exactly what I'm looking for. I can get your Khan Academies updated very quickly. But other than that, everything should be up to date. And we just had parent-teacher conferences yesterday. I talked with some of your parents. It wasn't really that many, but a couple. And there were some people that are doing great and just keep doing exactly what you're doing. There are some people that kind of are middle of the ground and maybe want to improve a little bit. We had some people that are stuck around the C, and they're like, you know what? I don't know if I can get an A, but I would really like a B. I would really like to turn that C into a B. And we talked about things to do and said, hey, you know what? We got lots of time. We got 2 months left. Absolutely have enough points available for you to move your C to a B. But let's see if you guys can play teacher for a second. It's recording your third line, so let's go to the bathroom. See if you guys can play teacher. If somebody is talking and says, hey, you know what? I really want to up my C to a B. What do you think is the first thing that I'm going to tell them?
Ask if they have missing work.
What?
Ask if they have missing work.
Yeah, well, I was just saying, don't have more missing work. Turn your stuff in on time. Because if all of your assignments are late, and if you can only get a C and 80% on them, it's mathematically impossible to raise your C up to a B if all you are getting are C's. And C's and C's and C's and C's and C's. It's not going to make that go up. Right? So you have to get your stuff in on time. And if you are failing and you want to get that F up to a D or a C range, then it's definitely, if you have any missing assignments, get them in. And those things that are already zeros, any grade is going to make your grade go up. But in order to stop or help missing work, I said this the very first week of the semester. I think I've said it a couple times after that. But again, I just want to reiterate, and this is a great time to do it because nobody is gone. Right? All of you guys are here. You know, everybody is here today, so everybody is hearing this. And if you are gone, this thing right here, the announcement, it is posted for every single class that I have. If you were gone the week before spring break, all you have to do is click on announcements, and you can go all the way down, and you can find the ones from March 20th, March 22nd, March 19th, March 17th, March 16th, 12th, 10th, 8th, 5th, 3rd, February 26th, all the way down to the very first one that we've done. Welcome to my class for biology 2. That was January 20th. Every single announcement is there. That will tell you what we did every single day that you were gone. Right? So it's okay if you miss, but it's just I'm not gonna get mad, and I haven't. But it's kind of a bit when I get emails, and you guys are all here today. So none of you guys are. But when I get emails and hey, I was gone yesterday. What did we do? It's on Canvas. Well, look, it's been there the entire year. Right? All the other teachers use it as well. I don't know if they all use announcements. I think probably. Right? But it's been there all year. You always know what we're doing. Right? So if, for example, if you were gone today, you should, and this is not something that I think any student should do. I expect everybody, if you are ever gone from a class, log in here and say, okay, well, I was gone from science today, so what did we miss? Well, it looks like we got a new seating chart. I'll find out where I sit when we come back. We're gone. I just randomly put this places where they're empty seats. Right? Then it says we're going to go over the final notes of evolution. Okay. If you have all of your stuff with you, you should still have this thing. The notes are posted online. You can go through them on your own. You can also watch the video and have that lady give the notes to you. There's lots of ways that you can do the notes. You can get stuff on your own. Right? Yeah, it may not be fun to do in the middle of your room. You know what? You got to do it anyway. And then you say, finally, we got an assignment that covers phylogeny and phylogenetic trees. Okay, you can find that assignment, and if you have gone through the notes, and all the assignments are always open notes, you can assign on your own as well. If there's something you don't get, send me an email. Don't wait 3 weeks to send me an email. All right, we get that too. I get a few that say, hey, you know what? Yeah, for that mutations lab, the one back there where we had the books inside out, I take down your thumbs. You know, I had some people over spring break, and if you were one of these people, I don't remember who you were. But I had people say, hey, I was gone that day, and I see I have as a 0. What do you want me to do for that? I'll go online and look at the lab and do the lab. Well, I wasn't there. It was 2.5 weeks ago. You should talk to me the day of you do it. Now, maybe a little more understanding, but if you just forgot about it for 2.5 weeks, yeah, it's a 0. Get your stuff done. Okay? But so you guys have all that information there, and for the last 2 weeks, the last 2 months, make a good effort to get your stuff done on time. If you are gone from a class, do this stuff. It's all there for you. That's why the school gave you all computers. Right? I know it's not really why they gave you all. They gave you all computers in case we went to level 3 or whatever the bad is. And we have to learn online. Okay? But the other happy accident is if you are ever home, if you are sick, if you have to have surgery, if you have to go to a wedding, if you're going on vacation, you have a computer, and almost everywhere has internet. Right? We got on a few wrestlers that I don't have internet at home. I don't care. Drive to the parking lot. You can steal the school's internet. Right? Go to McDonald's and sit in the parking lot. You guys, I don't buy the excuse. Oh, I didn't have any internet. Go find internet. Go to the library. Right? There's plenty of places around that have free internet. You guys have a computer. You have the ability to get these things done on time. And if you do that for about the last 2 months, we can see a lot of people change their F's to C's and D's. They can change their C's to P's. They can make their B's into A's. This can, your grade can get a lot better. But it starts with getting your stuff done on time. Okay? So, now that we have gone over that, we have notes, and then we have an assignment to do, and then we're done. You guys can ignore this. This is for the kids because parents used conference for yesterday. So what we are going to start off with, all right, we're not jumping into notes right away, but we are going to watch a 12-minute video because I think this guy is pretty good. And he talks about taxonomy, and this is kind of the beginning of phylogeny, which is what we're talking about. They are not the same thing, but they are very related. And we're going to start here. and this is what we're getting class. It's only 12 minutes. It's not like an hour-long video, so I don't think I'm going to make you guys shut your computers, but I want you paying attention. Right? I want you paying attention. Right? I will get this started, and then I will turn off the lights. Right?
The science of classifying living things. That sounds exciting. Today, we'll basically be learning the Dewey Decimal System of evolution. It's like filing. Must be on the edge of your seat. Okay, shut up. When it comes down to it, the science doesn't just categorize organisms. You look a little deeper, you realize it's telling the story of all life on Earth, and it's a pretty good story. Every living thing on this planet is related to every other living thing. If you go far enough back, we all have a common ancestor, an organism that both you and I are descended from, or something that a starfish and a blue whale are both descended from, or even weirder, that an oak tree and a salmon are both descended from. That organism lived. It lived very long ago, but it was here. And I dig that. The trick of taxonomy is basically figuring out where all those branches of the evolutionary tree are, and finding some convenient labels to help us understand all of these remarkable relationships. Let's be clear though, taxonomy isn't about describing life in all of its ridiculous detail. It's mostly about helping humans understand it, because it's way too complicated without structure. To get that structure, biologists use the taxonomic system to classify all the organisms on the Earth. It's sometimes called the phylogenetic tree, or the tree of life, and it illustrates the evolutionary relationships between all living species. So there are about 2 million known species. There could be anywhere from 5 million to 100 million species. Scientists really have no freaking idea. New species keep getting discovered all the time, and the more organisms we have to keep track of, the more complex the phylogenetic tree becomes. So there's not always a consensus about how to classify this stuff. There's a lot of gray area in the natural world. Actually, let me rephrase that. The natural world is one giant gray area. Sometimes it's just hard to know where to put a certain organism, and eventually the group gets so big, the classification system has to be messed with for it. So the system isn't perfect, but it's good enough that we've been using it for around 250 years. What's that? Do you spell a biography coming on? Carl Linnaeus was a Swede, born in 1707, and early in his career as a botanist, he realized that the botanical nomenclature of 18th century Europe was, well, just crap. For instance, in his day, the formal name of a tomato plant was Solanum caule inerme herbaceophorus spinatus incisus racemus simplicipus. Is incisus racemus simplicipus.
Alright. How's that sound for a name of a tomato? Alright, that's 9 words long. 1, 2, 3, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 words long. So what this Linnaeus guy said, he's going to talk about this in just a second, but here's kind of a very little preview. And he would say that, you know what, I go, these things have ridiculous names. We got to fix this. Not only are they too long, but what are we going to do as we find more species, and especially when they are starting to go over into America, and they're having in the world, there's a whole bunch of new species over here that they did not originally have over in Europe. And eventually we're going to have too much stuff. We need to make it more simple. And Linnaeus came up with the 2-word name that we use today. The scientific name is called the genus and the species of everything. So we went from 9 words down to 2, which is quite a bit more simple. He organized things a lot better. Does anybody know, just on top of your head, anybody know what the genus species name of a human is? Yeah, Homo sapiens. I think a lot of you guys, now that we say it out loud, think, oh yeah, I've heard of that. That's the same in those classes, right? But that's, I mean, imagine if we had a name that was 9 words long for human, and Homo sapiens a little bit easier, right? So that's kind of just, I know that was really long, but just to kind of digest in what was happening. This was how everything was named. And Linnaeus, he's going to talk about the history about how Linnaeus changed everything and why.
Linnaeus actually said, "Once I shudder at the sight of most botanical names given by modern authorities." Not only did the sloppiness bother him, he saw a whole sugar storm blowing in, because new plants were still being discovered in Europe, but that was nothing compared to the crazy stuff that was coming from the New World. Linnaeus saw that pretty soon naming conventions were just going to collapse under all these new things to name. Then what? So Linnaeus famously started off by naming himself. He came from a peasant family, and at that time surnames were just for rich people. So when Carl went to college, they asked him for his surname, and he just made one up, Linnaeus, after the linden trees that grew on his family's homestead. Linnaeus got a medical degree and became a professor at Uppsala University, where he devoted himself to the study of nomenclature. He had the students go to places and bring back specimens for him to study and categorize. The method he eventually adopted was based on morphology, or physical form and structure. This wasn't necessarily a new idea. Back then, people grouped organisms by analogous or homomorphic traits, structures that appear similar but actually come from completely independent origins. By this definition, birds would be more closely related to butterflies than to reptiles, because both birds and butterflies can fly. But Linnaeus had a good mind for this stuff and turned to have a real knack for choosing actual homologous traits for his classification system, traits that stem from a common evolutionary ancestor. Linnaeus, of course, didn't know jack about evolution. Darwin wouldn't come around for another 100+ years, but he intuited that some traits were more important than others. For instance, he was struck by the fact that reproductive apparatus seemed to be a good way of classifying plants. He also caused a bit of a scandal by classifying class Mammalia based on the female abilities to produce milk from their nipples, because apparently that was pretty racist stuff back then. In his lifetime, Linnaeus cataloged roughly 7,700 plants and 4,400 animals. He published his classifications in a catalog called Systema Naturae, which by the time he wrote its 12th edition was 2,300 pages long. Meantime, Linnaeus actually adopted a personal motto: God created, Linnaeus organized. Although taxonomy has come a long way since Linnaeus, we still use a bunch of conventions that he invented. For instance, we still arrange things into taxa, so organisms, and still use the same taxa as Linnaeus: kingdom, phylum, class, order, family, genus, and species. We also still use Linnaeus' convention of binomial nomenclature, using a unique two-part name for every species, genus and its species name, in Latin or sort of Latin-ish. This practice actually started back in the Middle Ages, when educated people were expected to know Latin. We know a lot less Latin now, but we know a lot more about evolution, which Linnaeus didn't. And we have technologies like genetic testing to classify relationships between organisms, and yet we still use Linnaeus' morphology-based system because genetic evidence generally agrees with classifications that are made based on structure and form. However, because there was a lot of life that Linnaeus had no idea about, we had to stick a new taxa above Linnaeus' kingdom. We call it domain, and it's as broad as you can get.
So, basically, Linnaeus started here.
We had to stick a new taxa above Linnaeus' kingdom. We call it domain.
We had to add another one. So Linnaeus started here about 250 or so years ago, and 250 or so years ago, they didn't really have much technology to see things like bacteria, things that were microscopic and small enough you can't see with the naked eye. And this is where we kind of categorize things into either a prokaryote, which are the single-celled bacteria, and the eukaryotes. There are a couple single-celled eukaryotes. The eukaryotes are mostly things like us and the multi-celled thing. So they did add one more. So this thing is not necessarily always correct. They do update it and they make changes as things come in. They find a brand new species doesn't really fit anywhere. You know what? They may throw another one in there. So time is not out of the realm of possibility.
And it's as broad as you can get. So domains are bacteria, archaea, and eukarya. The bacteria and the archaea are prokaryotes, meaning their genetic material goes commando, no nucleus to enclose it, while the eukarya make up all of the life forms with a nucleus, and include pretty much all of the life that you think of as life, and quite a lot of the life that you don't think about at all. It might seem like since all macroscopic life only gets one domain, it's kind of silly to give prokaryotes too. For a long time, we didn't divide them up into different domains. They hung out together in a single domain called the Nano. But it later became clear that bacteria, which live pretty much everywhere on Earth, including inside of you, with deep in the Earth's crust, and archaea, which are even more hardy than bacteria, have distinct evolutionary histories. Archaea being more closely related to eukaryotes, and yes, thus me and you, they have totally different cell membranes, and the enzymes that they use to make RNA, their RNA polymerase, is much more like ours. Under the domain eukarya, which is by far the most interesting and occasionally adorable domain, we have kingdoms Protista, fungi, plantae, and animalia. Now, scientists have settled on these four for now. But these are categories that are a human creation, but there are good reasons for that human creation. The unscientific truth is that we looked at life and divided it up based on what we saw. So we were like, well, protists are single-cell organisms, so they're very different from the rest of the domain. And plants get their energy from the sun. Fungi look and act very different from plants and animals, and we already know what animals are, so they have to get their own kingdom. And those scientists are sometimes loath to admit that system of just looking and dividing things up actually working pretty well for us. Not perfectly, but pretty well. But there's a reason why this works so well. Evolutionarily, there are actual categories. Each of these kingdoms is a huge branch in the tree of life. At each branch, an evolutionary change occurred that was so massively helpful that it spawned a vast diversity of descendants. Plants, or plantae, are the autotrophs of the domain. Eukarya, autotrophs meaning that they can feed themselves through photosynthesis, of course. Their cellulose-based cell walls and chloroplasts giving a distinct difference from all other multicellular life. There are two other sorts of trophs. There's the heterotrophs, which get their energy by eating other organisms, and the chemotrophs, which are weird and crazy and only show up in bacteria and archaea, and they get their energy from chemicals. Now, the kingdom Protista is weird because it contains both autotrophs and heterotrophs. Some protists can photosynthesize while others eat living things. Protists are basically a bunch of weird eukaryotic single-celled organisms that may or may not be evolutionarily related to each other. Scientists are still trying to figure it out. Some are plant-like, like algae, some are more animal-like, like amoebas, and some are fungus-like, like slime molds. Protists are one of those gray areas I was telling you about, so don't be surprised if by the time you're teaching this to your biology students, there are more than 4 kingdoms in Eukarya. Fungi, which are, the funguses. They include mushrooms and smuts and puffballs and truffles and molds and yeasts. And they're pretty cool because they have cell walls like plants, but instead of being made of cellulose, they're made of another carbohydrate called chitin, which is also what the beak of a giant squid is made of, with the exoskeleton of a beetle. Because fungi are heterotrophs, like animals, they have these sort of digestive enzymes that break down their food and get reabsorbed. But they can't move, so they don't require a stomach for digestion. They just grow on top of whatever it is they're digesting. Digest it right where it is. It's super convenient. And finally, we have Kingdom Animalia, which is the lovely kingdom that we find ourselves and 100% of adorable organisms in. Animals are multicellular, always. We are heterotrophic, so we spend a lot of time hunting down food because we can't make it ourselves. And almost all of us can move, at least during some stage of our life cycle. And most of us develop either 2 or 3 germ layers during embryonic development. Wait for it, unless you're a sponge. So like I said, we use this taxonomic system to describe the common ancestry and evolutionary history of an organism. Looking at the phylogenetic tree, you can tell that humans are more closely related to mice than we are to fish, and more closely related to fish than we are to fruit flies. So how about we pick an organism, follow it all the way through taxa, from kingdom to species, just to see how it works. I know. Let's pick this kitty, because I know she'd like it. Right, Cat? So kitties have cells that have nuclei and membranes surrounding organelles, and they're multicellular and heterotrophic and have 3 germ layers of cells when they're embryos, so they're in the kingdom Animalia. And they have a spinal cord running down their backs protected by vertebra and discs in between them, and they have a tail that doesn't have a butthole at the end of it like a worm, which I'm really glad about. And that puts her in the phylum Chordata. Kitty clearly does not like this, so I'm going to put her down now. And the kitty lactates and gives birth to young like a cow instead of laying eggs like a chicken. And they have fur and 3 special tiny bones in their ears that only humans have. So they're in the class Mammalia. So she's more closely related to cow than to chicken. Good to know. And like a bunch of other placental mammals that eat meat like weasels, the mustelids, and dogs, the canines, kitties are in the order Carnivora. And they're in the cat family, Felidae, whose members have lithe bodies and roundish heads, and except for cheetahs, retractable claws. And they're littler than tigers and panthers, which puts them in the genus Felis. And then at the level of the species, the descriptions get pretty dang detailed. So let's just say that you know what a cat is. So the species name is Catus. Now look at that! Felis catus!
No, gee, I could have that whole thing. Or stitched onto a pillow for you to sleep on. It would be cute.
Thank you for watching our taxidermy episode of Crash Course Biology. We hope that you learned something. Thanks to everybody who helped put this episode together. If you have any questions for us, please leave them on Facebook or Twitter in the comments below.
So, that is that. Now, if we actually go into the evolution notes, I'll find the notes here, concept or biologic notes. You can download the PowerPoint and look at the PDF, or if you are ever sick, there is still the video down there. It will not take that long. I think this one got I'm going to talk for 10 minutes, but the video itself. If there's ever anything I say that you don't get to go over, always watch those videos again on your own. I think they're just fine. But here we have the notes. So now we can get started. Lights back on. Wake up. Attention. Somebody from last class just let me know if they did Khan Academy. So I will go in sometime probably this evening. Is that great? Alright, so overview of taxonomy. Here is the same thing that they just went over in that whole little video. Domain, kingdom, phylum, class, order, family, genus, species. There is those are all called taxa. This is a domain taxa, all of those are taxa. It just means a group. Every living thing, whether it is a bacteria, a mold, a fungus, a fly, an elephant, or a human, can get put into all eight of those little groups. All eight of those taxa. We can go through. Well, sometimes, I don't know, some of you guys may find it interesting, some of you may not. I don't have all of these memorized for very many things, but I do know them for a human, and it's been relatively interesting, and people, I think, kind of, for the most part, like it. So we are going to go through, and even though it is not written here, we will go through and we will look at all of the taxa for us, a human. Alright, so we start off with domains. Alright? Well, we're not prokaryotes, we're not bacteria, and we're not little special bacteria that live in like the center and the very bottom of the ocean, big thermal vents, really extreme environments. So since we're not bacteria, we have to be in the domain area, very eukaryote. Alright, so we go into kingdom, much like the cat was in the video. We are animals. We are not protists. We are not a fungus. We are not a plant. So we are in the kingdom Animalia. Again, they kind of have that little Latin end to it. It's all that animals are in Animalia. Alright? Phylum is the same as the cat as well. We have a backbone that runs down our back that encases a spinal cord, just like a cat does. So we are in phylum Chordata. And then the next one is the same thing as the cat as well. This is the last one that we have in common with the cat. Our class, just like the cat, we are mammals. We give birth to live young. We have the malus, stabies, 3 bones here, and we have some hair. Those are the really main factors that say if you are a mammal or not. So we are in the class Mammalia. So everything from here up, area, Animalia, Chordata, Mammalia, are the exact same as a cat. And the bottom 4, we are a bit. So it's kind of, the more things that you have in common, the more closely related you are. So is carnivore. They're not can't eat meat. There is not a kind of order omnivore or something like that, even though they're omnivores. They're actually in the order, same order. So what?
Primates.
Yeah, for the order, primates. I don't know if anybody. That's crazy. The family is kind of a weird word unless you have this Googled up right in front of you. I don't expect anybody to know what family we are in. It's a weird word. It's and I don't always right. It's like Hominidae. It's what we are. It's like Hominida. Hominidae, something like that. That's the family. And then our genus species. Our genus is Homo, and our species is Sapien, which is why we are called Homo sapiens. They only use the genus or the species name for our scientific name because they are the two most specific things. If we called everything by their domain and kingdom, think of how many things would be Eukarya Animalia. Fly, a cat, a dog, an elephant, a dragonfly, a bee, a worm, a beetle, a alligator, a bird, everything that is an animal would have these same two things. They all have the same name. So it makes sense that we use the two most specific to give us our name. So for humans, then it goes Homo sapiens. So that is all the taxonomy for a human. I think they went through plenty of background on where we get these things, where they come from in the video. So I just think it's kind of interesting to go through and see what all humans are because we're in there. So that's about all I'm going to do on this slide. The next slide talks a bit more about the genus species name. Again, I alluded to it on the last page that they are the most specific taxa, most specific groups, which is why we use them. There are a few conventions that we use when using the genus species name. The big thing is they are always written in italics. The genus is always capitalized. The species is never capitalized. So it's always two words in italics. The first one is capitalized, the second one is not capitalized. And the cool thing, they didn't say this. Since this is kind of written flat anyway, they don't translate. So it doesn't matter if you are a scientist in the States, or a scientist in Germany, or a scientist in Nigeria, or a scientist in China, or a scientist in Russia, no matter where you are, if you study a polar bear, you are talking with somebody else, you don't need to learn Russian to talk to a Russian scientist, you just would say Ursus maritimus, and they would know if they study polar bears as well, if they do polar bear, the scientific name was, they would know that that's polar bear. It's the same across all languages. I learned that when I was in grad school, but I thought that was kind of cool. So it's just some little bit of information that I will mark on you guys. They don't translate those. So I think that's the genus here, Ursus, means bear. So bears are in the Ursus genus. But then the species, of course, they are different species. So the brown bear would be Ursus maritimus, and that's just kind of showing how we use genus species. Sometimes they call it scientific. All right. Anybody have any questions about this stuff? Again, this was done by that Carl Linnaeus and all that stuff. I think to this point is pretty much what we went over and reinforced with the video. All right, this slide here, I've gone back and forth on this slide. I understand what it does, but the people that we got our curriculum from, the people that, there's hundreds of different curriculums. I mean, ours is online, so ours is kind of helps us be ready for online teaching, so that's why we have all these PowerPoints and stuff. But other classes, it's just like a textbook. You have 4, 5, 6 different textbooks that all contain the same stuff. Just do it slightly. Our curriculum here, I see what they're trying to do, but with endosymbiosis, I think it's important. I think it's really cool personally, but they don't really bring up endosymbiosis anywhere else. It's not in the assignment today. They don't cover endosymbiosis. It's not on the quiz. I might add a question on the quiz, but I could skip over it, but I like it, so I'm not going to. So I'm going to spend about 10 minutes here. We're going to talk a little bit about endosymbiosis here. And this stuff happened so long ago. It is almost hard to imagine 3.5 billion years ago. It's so long ago that I don't think you guys can even really understand how far away that is. And I don't even know if I can really understand how long away that is. I mean, I've been alive longer than you guys by about 22 years or so, 21 years, something like that. This doesn't make me ancient by any means, but it's 3.5 billion years. It's so long. Nobody was around then, so nobody really knows what happened. Most scientists have hypothesized or have guessed at and theorized that 3.5 billion years ago, the world was just one big ocean, one big ball of water. No land in it. There was land, just a lot of the ocean. The plate tectonics that moved, that kind of caused, they kind of jump up on one another, they kind of raise up. They had not created the land mass that we have now. So the world was basically one big ocean. It just wasn't necessarily as deep because land goes up and it's just water somewhere else, even though there's no water here, it makes it deeper somewhere else. It was one big ocean. And that's where a lot of scientists theorize. Again, it's not all scientists agree on it, but it's enough that that's what this curriculum teaches. And they say about 3.5 billion years ago, we had the first life form came about. It was a protist. It was a bacteria. And this bacteria just kind of floated around in the ocean. It was just a big saltwater ocean, and that's kind of all they did. It was a single-cell bacteria. And that was all we had for about 1.4 billion years. So 1.4 billion years, and then we finally jumped to eukaryotes. Eukaryotes are the cells that have a nucleus, they have membrane-bound organelles, and they can be multi-celled. And a lot of scientists wonder, well, hey, that's great. We are eukaryotes. It's nice to know where we came from, but how did a prokaryote just turn into a eukaryote? And there are a few ideas, but the most widely accepted is this endosymbiotic theory. And they just tell you about it. But if I said, hey guys, remember that the endosymbiotic theory suggests that over time, coevolution of two prokaryotes occurred, and eventually led to speciation and the first eukaryotes. Got it, right? It makes sense. Not really. I don't like that. I mean, if I just told you that, you guys could write it down, you could maybe memorize it, really know what that means. Maybe some people, but I would guess most of you probably not, if you're being honest with yourselves. And so I'm going to talk about what endosymbiosis theory actually is. And it's going to take me a little bit, maybe about 5 or 10 minutes. But I think it's worth it because I think it's cool. And even if I don't ask a whole bunch of questions on it, it's interesting. I like to tell you guys interesting things, right? So we are back to about 2.1-ish billion years ago, right when these eukaryotes are starting to come around. So before they are around, we have these two prokaryotes, these two bacteria are kind of floating around in this big ocean. And one bacteria is very, very small, but it produces a lot of energy. it is able to produce a crap ton of energy. It has energy left over. And energy is kind of it's what these little bacteria need. They need energy to stay alive. And this is very, very good at making energy. But it has one downside as well. It's small. So what happens if a bacteria is small? Well, other bacteria that are bigger can come and eat it. All right? Bacteria, they just envelop things. It means they just kind of come up and then using this as my example, I don't know the best example in the world, but if one bacteria is about this size, or one bacteria is about this size, and it can just come in and swallow it up and eat it. So this one's bigger. This one cannot eat the big one. Right? The big one eats the little. So the little bacteria have more things to worry about. So it's tiny, it is prone to being eaten, but it makes a boatload of energy. Now we have another bacteria. Now we have our big one. Right? Big bacteria doesn't have to worry about anything eating it because there's not many bacteria that are bigger than it. So it's kind of top of the food chain. But when you are bigger, what do you need more of? You need more energy. Right? So this bigger one, it's not quite as good at making energy as the little guy. Because it has to make more and it has to use more and it's harder. So as it's going around looking for food, again, nobody's around, they don't know this. I'm kind of putting words in the mouth of the little bacteria. But this big bacteria says, hey, oh, that thing's got a bunch of energy, I'm going to eat it. And scientists don't really know why, but for some reason, rather than just digesting it and eating it, it engulfed it and the little bacteria lived inside the big bacteria. Now we have a cell that has two cells. Right? We have our first eukaryotic cell. And this is a good thing for both cells. The little cell can still create all of its energy that it wants, and if it is inside of the big cell, there's nothing that's going to come around and eat it. It is protected. It is happy. And now the big cell, right? The big cell needs energy. Well, that little thing makes extra energy. So it makes enough energy for itself, and the big bacteria can get some of that extra energy from the little one, and it is happy as well. So that was kind of what a lot of scientists believe endosymbiosis, because endo is kind of like engulfing, and symbiosis is a mutualistic relationship. So that's why they call it the endosymbiosis theory of how one bacteria ate another bacteria, and that was kind of the beginning of eukaryotic cells, membrane bound now. And that a lot of scientists theorized it was not the same back 2.1 billion years ago. That little bacteria that got swallowed is what eventually became. Anybody have any ideas of what it might have become? Our cells. What gives us energy in our cells? Yeah, they became our mitochondria. Right? A lot of scientists believe our mitochondria was once its own prokaryotic cell on its own. And why do we think that the mitochondria was its own cell all by itself? Because little do you know, I did not talk about this when we went over the microbiology section of our cells, but mitochondria have their own DNA that is totally different than your DNA. Right? All of the mitochondria in your cells have their own DNA that is different than the DNA that is in every other one of your cells. So that's how when they have this little thing with weird DNA that seemingly doesn't come from anywhere, scientists believe, hey, you know what? That cell probably was its own cell at one point in time. And that's the endosymbiosis theory. I think it's kind of cool to think about how those two bacteria formed a mutualistic relationship to make life easier for both of them. And you know what? Nobody was around 2.1 years ago, so who knows if that what actually happened or not. But the fact that our mitochondria have their own DNA, it's kind of, I just think that's a cool thing to think about. Even if we don't ask many questions on it, you know what? You guys get older, that'll help you on trivia. And just to know that that's where a lot of science mitochondria came from. But I still think it's a cool thing. So I think it's worth 10 minutes of your time. So next, phylogenetic trees. Right? A phylogenetic tree is a diagram used to predict evolutionary relationships among groups of organisms. Alright, so they have these branch points. Like here is a branch, here is a branch, here is a branch, and here is a branch. And these branch points show new species diverging from a common ancestor. So right here, we have a common ancestor that was the same ancestor to both a lizard and a snake. And something happened and it made a lizard go this way and a snake go this way. Right here, earlier in time, right, this is like the past. And this is kind of like the present. Alright, so at some point, there was no such thing as a lizard or a snake. There was just this one thing. And then something happened evolutionarily and it changed, and that made a lizard, and it kept going this way and made a snake. Alright, so there is some animal that both a lizard and a snake were an ancestor, were related to. Kind of like how the guy in the video said that if you go back far enough, you can find an organism that was a common ancestor to both humans and tigers. Find one that was a common ancestor to humans and houseflies. Find one that was a common ancestor to a human and an oak tree. Right? Again, it would take a while. I mean, we're talking billions and billions of years. It's not like 100 years ago. Right? It doesn't work that way. Way, way, way long ago. But at some point there was. Right? So all these points are where a new species diverged from a common ancestor. Now there are hypotheses that are based along why these happen, right? Maybe, here we had, right here we had no legs, or you know what? Since all of these things have legs, I'm going to say these all have legs. And then something happened right here, said no legs. Right? So the lizard still have legs, and then there might be something, maybe it's morphological, it might be something genetic, it might be a behavior, but something happened to change, and then without no legs, and then that's where we got snakes from. That's how they came out. That's kind of what this is trying to show. There's a lot of other things that phylogenetic trees show, but we got more slides. I don't need to try to explain everything right now. They do have this word here, maximum parsimony, and that's just a fancy way of saying, the simplest answer is usually right. Explain something quite simply, like, hey, all of these have legs and this one doesn't. So you know what? The fact that there's no legs is probably the branch point right here. Right? That's a relatively simple explanation, and usually the most simplest things is true. Right? Don't hold. That's kind of what that maximum parsimony is. Okay? Parsimony. All right. The last thing that I want to say is, since this is, remember we said this is the past, present, that means this happened a really long time ago. And this was a little bit more recent, and since this one right here is the most recent split, because time goes bottom to top, since this is the most recent split, you could say on this phylogenetic tree, lizards and snakes are the most closely related to each other because they split last. Lizards and snakes were essentially the same thing right here. They're the same thing, they're the same thing, they're the same thing, they're the same thing, and then they broke off. Alright, amphibians broke off first, mammals broke off next, then turtles, then you got lizards and snakes. Does that make sense? Does that kind of make sense? We read phylogenetic trees from the bottom to the top, from oldest to most recent. Not read them left to right. it is not always going to be the two on the end that are going to be the most related. And I will show you that on the next slide. Here is another phylogenetic tree. It is the exact same thing. Past, up to present. Right, there is a branch right here. There is a branch right here. This is drawn a little bit differently. It doesn't look like a whole bunch of flies. It's more like a little sideways and sideways. It kind of looks, go upside down, it kind of looks like pedigree a little bit more. But there's a branch right here. Here's another branch, another branch, another branch, another branch, branch. So, on this one, you guys don't have to come up here. But just looking at this, what do you guys think are the two most related species on this phylogenetic tree? What two things are most related to each other on this tree?
The lizards and snakes.
Snakes, same as last time. Right? He is correct. It is not always the two on the end. It is not non-avian dinosaurs and crocodiles. Right? You have to go by the most recent branch. So this branch here is closest to the present. So the two things that came off this branch are going to be the most closely related to each other. Okay? That kind of makes sense? Alright, I hope. This is just shows how, yeah, the same thing, but they don't always have to be on the end. Alright, so please do not read them left to right, because you have to go bottom to top. You can't go left to right. It doesn't work. It's not the way that you do it. Okay? Alright. From a phylogenetic tree, we can learn which groups are most closely related. Alright, we've gone over this. I think you guys can tell. It would be a pine and a rose. Those are the most closely related because they have the most recent branch right up here. Look at the things that diverge first. That would be these down here. Right? And we can look at ones that are least related. They are furthest apart. And again, it's not necessarily furthest apart here, but it's furthest apart. The ones that they branched off first is what you look at to see the least related. Okay? Any questions on that? All right. I'm going to do a little bit of drawing on this one, so I'm going to take things back and go through. I think this slide kind of helps pull a few things together. So, I've said a couple times the word common ancestor, and I just want to make sure that we know, you know what I mean when I say a common ancestor. It is an ancestor. It's not like your grandparent. That's your ancestor. But it could be like somebody that was common to everyone. Hello? Okay. Okay. All right. Yep. Thanks. Have a good one. We are going to work on an assignment, so just make sure to get that down too. Okay. All right, so common ancestor. I've said it a few times, but I want you to know what I mean. All right, when we look for a common ancestor, right, it's like we go to this little point right here, and this says that we have a common ancestor to A, B, C, D, E, and F. All of those things there. So what does that mean? What it means to be a common ancestor, it means that I can draw a line from this point to every single one of these without ever going down. I cannot go backwards in time. That is illegal. Alright? So, I can go sideways and forward to get to A, sideways, up, to get C, sideways up, get to C, up to get to D, I can get to E, and I can get to F. I can make a lines in every single letter, every single animal here, only going sideways or up. That means I have a common ancestor to everything. Alright, now that one's kind of easy because I can get everywhere. Now what if we look at this one? Right, if I go right here, I can go up to C, I can go over it up to D, I can go up to E, F, but from right here, I cannot get to A and B. The only way that I can get to A and B is I would have to go down here. Remember, we are not allowed to go backwards in time. Can't go backwards. So that means right here, we are only a common ancestor to C, D, E, and F. I think, I don't know, maybe I'm, but I think kind of seeing it like that and seeing these things here laid out, I think this kind of helps bring it a little bit together and understand like what I mean by a common ancestor. It's something that all four, like right here is a point that all four of these things came from. Right? Right here, they were all the same thing. And then there's a branch that created C. Then everything else went this way. Then there's another branch that created D. And then everything else went this way. Then there's a branch that created E and F. But they all came from the exact same spot, which is why they're a common ancestor. So that is a common ancestor to organisms C, D. Does that make sense? I see that you guys are quiet. I'm trying to decide if you guys are quiet because you're playing games. I'm trying to decide if you're quiet because it's the end of the day and you're tired. Or I'm trying to decide if you're quiet because you have no idea what the heck I'm talking about. It's not the last one. They're sometimes when I just kind of say something to catch up. It's kind of what I'm trying to do. Okay? I hope you guys are getting that, but that's kind of, you know, going on this line, I don't know if there's another way that I can describe what common ancestors are. I can do more, or we can look at different ones, like right here, it's not written up there. Right here would be a common ancestor to only E and F, right? It would not be, say, common to just E and F, right? It's not, can't go to the other ones, you have to go down, not allowed to go backwards. Other thing here, extinction. Every once in a while, animals will go extinct, and if they go extinct, it's not really a huge deal, but just so you understand and don't see it. They usually will put a little sideways line at the end, showing that, and sometimes, if something went extinct like a long time ago, they might just have a line back here. They would say B, like all that is just gone. Might have one all the way down there, and then it's going up because, again, this is what we said. They could do that as well. But just if you see something like that with a little sideways line, just know that means it's extinct. They say that. Are there any other questions? Second to last slide. This is how not to do a phylogenetic tree. Right? And it's basically the exact same thing I said on the very first, the part of the third slide, is you do not read them left to right. This does not mean that a bacteria evolved into an amoeba, and then an amoeba evolved into an insect, then an insect evolved into a trout, and a trout evolved into a human, and a human evolved into a bird. It does not go that way. cannot read these things left to right. It does not mean that humans are greater than trout, which are greater than an insect, which is greater than an amoeba. You don't just have the little greater than or less than signs. Okay? We're not greater than. It's that it doesn't work that way. Right? All this means is this was the branch longest ago. And then you get a little bit more recent, and there's a branch. A little bit more recent, and there's a branch. A little bit more recent, there's a branch. And the last branch would be humans and birds. Does not mean humans and birds are the most closely related species in the world. It means of all of these things, they're more closely related. I think we are probably aware that humans are more closely related to all other mammals and birds. So if I had a cat or a pig or a dog or a monkey on here, it would be even closer to humans. So this doesn't mean it is only relevant to the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 things that are on the tree. It does not mean there's not a phylogenetic tree for every single organism on Earth. It would be way too common. Alright, so just take this thing at face value and don't overthink it. Okay? Alright, last slide. Here is alright. Right here is a phylogenetic tree. There is no questions. There is no words. There are a few words, but there's nothing else on here. It's just here for me to ask you guys some random questions. All right, I haven't asked the same question in all the classes, so I just kind of think up ones that go along. So, first question's probably going to be the easiest. All right, so maybe if you want an easier one, raise your hand right away. Let's see, what do I want to ask first? What are the two things on this phylogenetic tree that are most closely related? All right, these are hard.
Humans and chimpanzees.
Humans and chimpanzees. Again, it is not just the ones at the end. It's not the ones at the end. It's the ones that have the most recent branch. And that most recent branch is right here. And it goes to chimpanzees and humans. All right, very good. Now, this next one. I want you to come up here to the board, my pen, and I want you to show me where would a common ancestor between a gorilla and a gibbon, two things that are G. Yep, just put a dot where the common ancestor between a gorilla and a gibbon. Very good. You guys are my 6th class, and Miss Islin is actually out of the 6 classes the second person that's gotten that right. And I don't think it's a question, but a lot of people, they just look, oh, gorilla, all right, it branches right there. But you gotta look at the other one too. And I had some people say, well, gorillas and gibbons, all right, we'll come down, well, we'll probably break the difference and we'll go somewhere right in the middle. And you can say all these different things, right? But, I erased her down. She is correct. What you have to find is you have to find the line that you can draw to both a gibbon and a gorilla without going backwards. If I go right here, I would have to go backwards to get to a gibbon. And if I was right here, I would have to go backwards to get to a gibbon. And I can't do that. You're not allowed to go backwards in time. So right here, I can draw a line to a gibbon, and I can draw a line to the gorilla. she is correct. That is the common answer. Right? Now, oddly enough, this place right here, even though I just said gibbons and gorillas, this is the same place as a common ancestor to a gibbon and an orangutan, or a gibbon and a human, or a gibbon and a chimpanzee. It is all right here. I just randomly picked two. Okay? Does that make sense? All right. Where would a common ancestor be? Somebody come up here and do it between a New World monkey and an Old World monkey. All right, so we'll monkey and an Old World. Perfect. All right. Perfect. From right here, I can go sideways and up to the New World monkey. I can go sideways and up to the Old World. Old World monkeys and New World monkeys, they seem pretty similar. There are only one word difference in their name, but they're actually the second least related things on here. They branch into the second branch. Wow. Okay. All right. That being said, anybody have any questions or anything that doesn't make sense that I did that well? I think we're good. It is 2:57, which means you guys have 23 minutes. That should be plenty of time to finish the assignment. The assignment is only 18 questions long. If we get out of here, as many as you want. It's a homework assignment. It's not a quiz. So if you go to, oh, it's not an announcement. So I want to go to assignments. And I haven't turned it on yet. I'm going to say here, phylogenetic tree practice. If you go to phylogenetic tree practice, you can go right here, and here are all questions. There is one that I messed up on, so I am going to give everybody the answers. And if you go down to this picture here, one that has lampreys, sharks, rayfin fish, lungfish, amphibians, land vertebrates, go down. For mine, it's question 5. For me, it's question 5, but I will say that everybody might have they put them in a different order. So it could be a different number question. But the question that says, who is the ray-fin fish more closely related to? Answer is lungfish. The answer really isn't lungfish, and I'll explain why in just a second. But that's what the correct answer is assignment. So put lungfish and you'll get a.
It's like different. So what's the question?
He said it might be a different number. Question will be there.
What's the question?
Who is the ray-fin fish more closely related to? Okay? Now when we go up here, now let's talk for a second about, if here's the ray-fin fish, it branched off right here. And it branched off from the lungfish, amphibians, and land vertebrates. At this point, they were all the same thing. So actually the ray-fin fish is equally related to all 3 of those. And that's why lungfish isn't technically the right answer, but I missed this one. I was taking it. So I'm just telling you all, put lungfish, get a point. I'm just giving you a free answer. There were 18 questions. Now you only have 17 left. Fair enough? But actually, in theory, the real answer should be lungfish, amphibians, and land vertebrates are all equally related because they all branched off from this one point right here. They were all the same thing right here, and then this way went to ray-fin. Okay? questions? All right, you guys can have the rest of the time to work on this. I've got a couple emails to read and maybe get back to, and then I will be walking around. And if you guys have any questions, please raise your hand. I would love to help you guys out on this. And we will go over.
It's I like
Okay. Sign. Oh.
he's drawing and just fine. I'm doing my I don't know why, but
So for these ones, it's like that. Is that where it gets cut off for that one, or does it like keep on going up?
That's the trait. So everything that goes through there all has a vertebra.
Okay. Yeah.
Then that goes over there because sharks only have a vertebra. Everything else up this way all has a bony skeleton.
But sharks don't.
No, sharks have cartilage.
Okay.
All right, so they do not have a bony skeleton. Then you go up there, so that means a ray fin fish has a vertebra and a bony skeleton, but it does not have 4 limbs. And then everything that's 4 limbs comes up this way.
Okay. Thank you.